If you have a true scary story that you would like to hear featured on the channel, then go to mariesfield.com and send it my way. And of course, thank you. Every year, my family would have a big 4th of July party. My grandparents would come over, aunts, uncles, cousins, and even some close friends and neighbors. All the kids would line up their fireworks and we'd decide in what order we wanted to shoot everything. The adults always prepared the food and would sit around and talk. It was always a blast. We rarely had issues as in fights, injuries, and the such, and I think a lot of that had to do with my grandfather. If anyone tried to start an argument, he always knew what to say to get people to calm down and ease the tension. He was a smart man, and I definitely learned a lot from him over the years. As I got older and started going to parties or hosting my own, I always held on to some of his wisdom and advice to make me a better person. One of the things he taught me was to be aware of your surroundings. He was in the Air Force, and he always talked about how important it is to know what's happening around you, and while you shouldn't dwell on the negative, you should also be able to get an idea as to possible outcomes around you and know how to react to them appropriately. This has helped me tremendously in my career of becoming an aircraft mechanic, as you have to be precise in everything you do. Another thing he taught me was no matter where you live or your age, it's always polite to get to know your neighbors. Again, you never know if you could be the person they need in their life to be a friend or someone they can turn to when they feel they may be in trouble or need help. So, when my parents moved and I was still young, we made little baskets for everyone on our block as a way of introducing ourselves. These were 2 things he taught me that are important to this story today. I was thankful that my wife was able to meet my grandfather before his passing, so she knew all about him and his wisdom. So when we got our first place together, she knew that we would have to introduce ourselves to the block. We moved in early June and decided we wanted to have a housewarming party and 4th of July party all in one. Because of this, we agreed we would let the neighborhood know as well as a warning in case we got too loud or if they wanted to join and get to know each other better. We prepared our gifts that week, and over that weekend, we went off to start handing them out. Everything went as I would expect. Some people were happy to meet us, some were surprised people still introduced themselves, and some even wanted to show my wife her jewelry collection. There were 2 houses, though, that we did not get an answer at, so we left our gift with a card at the door so they still get the introduction and invite. One of our neighbors, Kathy, seemed to be the cliche neighbor that knows everything about everyone, so we got the short version of everyone's history from her. I appreciated this since I wasn't able to meet everyone, and I had mentioned this to her. She explained that one house was someone's winter house and that they wouldn't be back for a few months, and the other one she said to give up on trying to meet them. Curious, I asked her about this. She said it was a middle-aged couple living there. They rarely went outside, and she thinks the guy worked overnights, as she always saw him coming home late at night and not leaving until the evening, while the woman always left midday looking her best and coming home before he left for the night. She tried talking to them on a few occasions, and the guy tended to ignore her, while the woman seemed to rush the conversation and didn't want to get too close. She said she gave up on trying to get to know them, but she had her door camera, so she always saw them coming and going since they lived across from her. I kept this in the back of my mind to process later. We said our goodbyes, finished by going back to the winter house to pick up the gift we had left, and agreed to try again in the winter, being assured by Kathy that she would let us know when they got back. The following morning, as we left to get coffee, I noticed the gift from the mysterious couple's home was gone, so hopefully they got it and at least enjoyed it. The next couple of weeks went by as normal. We unpacked and prepared ourselves for our party, this whole time never seeing this couple. Kathy was certainly right. It was going to make for a difficult time if we ever wanted to try meeting them. Then came the night of the party. Both of our parents showed up, a few of our siblings because some couldn't make it, as well as some old friends and new neighbors. Kathy came over and brought us a cake, I believe, but said since her dog was afraid of fireworks that she would watch ours from her home so he wasn't alone. A few people had kids with them, so we kept it appropriate for the time being. After the kids finished off their fireworks and those families left as well as our parents, we started getting a little more rowdy. There was more drinking, a little more stupidity with fireworks, but everyone was having a good time. At one point, I was fetching more rounds for everyone, asking who all wanted one, when I noticed a guy that was talking to my wife's friend over towards the side of the patio that I didn't recognize at first. He was wearing dark jeans that appeared to be really muddy, a button-down shirt that was halfway open, and a baseball cap. Thinking it was someone her friend brought along, I asked if they wanted anything and made my way to the kitchen to grab the drinks. I gave her friend and the guy their drinks. They both said thanks, and I carried on passing out the other drinks. As the night went on, I saw the same guy talking to other people, including my wife. He was still carrying around the same bottle that I got him, and when I asked if he wanted another one or if I could take it from him, he always refused, saying he was still drinking it. I kept an eye on him just because I didn't recognize him and no one had introduced him to me yet. We still enjoyed our night, taking pictures and recording our stupid antics until it was time for people to start dispersing. When my wife was seeing her friend off, I noticed the guy wasn't with her, so I went and asked her about him. She said she had come alone, but the guy was talking to her for quite a bit. She said she didn't recognize him either and thought it was one of my friends from work since I was talking to him quite a bit. I let it go, thinking maybe he was someone from work that I didn't know too well, or maybe he came with someone else and didn't notice. I did drink a lot that night, so I was also not fully there, I'm sure. We cleaned up a bit and headed to bed. Thankfully, we were off the next day so we could recover, but still was never able to determine who our mystery guest was. As I was coming home from work sometime that same week, I saw several cop cars at the non-social neighbor's house. Like anyone would, I tried looking to see if I could tell what was going on, but couldn't see much more than crime scene tape going across the house. I got home to be greeted with my wife and Kathy in the living room. They told me they didn't know what was going on yet, but Kathy was already visiting when the police started showing up. Shortly after I got home, Kathy mentioned going back home so she could try to find out more when we actually had someone else knocking on our door. It was another officer wanting to ask questions about our neighbor and if we had seen him. I explained that I didn't even know what they looked like, but Kathy began describing them more and said she hadn't seen them in a few days. The officer pulled out a picture to show us and asked if we'd seen him when my wife and I realized he was the guy that was at our party. Kathy and the officer both looked shocked. The officer began asking us what he was wearing, how long he was there, wanted to know when he got there and when he left, if he said anything to us or was acting suspicious at all. We tried to answer the best we could about his whereabouts and explain he was technically invited, but since we never actually met them, we didn't know if they would show up or not. Kathy finally started asking the questions we were all wondering to find out what was going on when the officer tried being vague but still informed us. He said they were called there on a welfare check by someone, and upon arrival, they had reason to enter the property where they found a female's body in a tub, and the man that lived there was nowhere to be found. Kathy's description confirmed it was the woman that lived there, and we were all in shock. They said they were looking for him for questioning and asked us to call if we saw him, but to avoid letting him in as he might be dangerous. So we were obviously a bit on edge at this point, not knowing what to do. We offered to let Kathy and her dog stay in our spare room so she wasn't alone, but was insistent that she would be okay alone. We walked her back home, and when we returned, we made sure all the windows and doors were locked to make sure there was no chance of someone getting in. Thankfully, we also had security cameras that we could watch as well. That day came and went without them finding the guy. News vans started showing up, and we were seeing it on TV now. That's when it started getting worse. They said he was wanted for the murder of his girlfriend, who most likely died on the 4th. That's when I started thinking, this guy was definitely at my place on the 4th. He wasn't talking about himself much, but made sure to talk to a few people to make it obvious he was there. I began feeling sick, like we were being used as an alibi. This girl was either dead or dying in a house a few down from ours while we were there covering for him. A murderer. Our families were there. It was a terrifying thought. While it was bittersweet as a woman lost her life, they did finally catch the guy. He was trying to flee the country, but only got as far as Texas when they finally caught him. Now, this was coming from Kathy, but she said her late husband was a cop, so she knew some of the detectives. They told her that the woman's sister hadn't heard from her, and the guy had a record and was worried something had happened. She was most likely killed the night of the 4th, so that confirmed my suspicion that we were definitely used. I'm glad they caught the guy, but since this incident, I monitor a hell of a lot better as to who comes over to my place or just who I'm around in general. My grandfather was definitely right. You really can't be too careful. This happened to me back when I was 15. My birthday is on June 23rd, and we had just had a family party for me, including my dinner of choosing, which was at my favorite Mexican restaurant. Then we went home, opened presents, and had cake and ice cream. Afterwards, we watched a movie together and had more snacks like popcorn and candy, so I crashed pretty hard afterwards. It was a fantastic day, until I went to bed and had a horrible nightmare that felt so real. In my dream, my mom, dad, older brother, and I had gone out to get fireworks for the 4th of July. We got the stuff we normally did, like smoke bombs, parachutes, fountains, the whole works. My dad always liked to end with a big show, so he bought a bunch of different mortars, letting us each pick out one too that we specifically wanted to see. Then we would pick out some random little things here and there that they showed on their display screen, or anything really that caught our eye. Walking down one of the displays was this piece that was honeycomb shaped. The colors on the wrapper, however, were a golden yellow and orange, and the name was something to the effect of dancing bees or similar. It looked kind of cute. It made me think of my mom because she had a butterfly garden in our front yard that was always filled with butterflies and bees, and she loved it. I called her over to show her, and as expected, her face lit up and told my dad she wanted to get it, so naturally we did. Then, when we started lighting things off, my grandma and mom were sitting on their patio chairs on our porch, while my dad and brother were starting to light off the bigger mortars. I loved watching them, but was still nervous about lighting them, so I just watched them from the porch as well. When they got to the bee one that my mom and I picked out, my brother lit it and ran towards my dad, who was standing to the side near the garage. After waiting in anticipation, we saw the fuse die out with nothing more. After a few seconds, my dad agreed to go check it out, and as he approached it, there was a huge burst of light that came out of it, causing me to flinch. When I finally looked back up, my dad was on the ground with my brother standing over him. That's when I noticed my hearing seemed to be muffled and was slowly coming back as I heard screaming around me getting louder. I turned around to see my mom slumped back in her chair with something big smashed into her face. Then I turned around as I seemed to recognize the screams, which were coming from my grandmother. She was rolling around on the ground, trying to put out the flames that were seeming to engulf her. I just remember standing there, frozen in place, not knowing what to do. Do I check to see if my mom is even alive? Do I help my grandma? What about my dad? The next thing I knew, I woke up in my bed covered in sweat and I just started shaking and crying. I had never had a dream, or nightmare rather, feel so real. The terror was overwhelming. I could feel the heat of the fire and the splitting headache from the loud blast. But it was all just a dream. I got up and turned on my computer to check the date and time, and to my relief, it was June 24th, around 2 or 3 in the morning. I went to the restroom to splash water on my face to try and calm my nerves before I finally laid back down. I turned on the TV to try and get my mind elsewhere before I finally could fall back asleep, telling myself it was just a dream. I was 15, as I said, so I didn't really talk to my parents about having a bad dream. So I just kind of kept it to myself, other than maybe a good friend of mine. They thought it was a pretty crazy dream too, but then we moved on from it. It wasn't till a few days later, when we went to go get our fireworks, that it would all come back to me. We went on that following Saturday when my dad was off work to get our supplies. We picked out our normal items and then started looking at the mortars. I hadn't even thought of my dream since then because, while it was pretty scary, it was just a dream. But I would be lying if I said it didn't all come rushing back to me and make me hesitate when I saw that same dancing bees display sitting out. In this reality, though, I chose not to point it out to my mom. I didn't really believe in supernatural phenomena or whatever you want to call those, but I guess the dream messed me up enough to steer away from it. Though that doesn't stop other people, so when my brother noticed it, he immediately pointed it out to my mom. As expected, she liked it and wanted to get it. I was not comfortable with this idea whatsoever, so I tried all I could to talk them out of it. I suggested we get something else. I said the name was just going to be misleading, and I even said I wasn't comfortable with it or it didn't seem safe. My dad immediately pointed out that I've never really been afraid of fireworks to the point that I didn't want them to get something, and asked what was wrong. I didn't want to look dumb or be made fun of by my brother potentially, so I just said it didn't look safe. As expected, my brother teased me about being scared, while my dad tried to assure me it would be fine and that we were all safe when it came to the fireworks and they carried it off. I refused to carry it, and I made them put it in the shed in the back as far away as possible from the house. So, the night of the 4th, we got all set up for our little show. This year, it was only going to be the 4 of us plus my grandma. Sometimes we had friends or aunts and uncles stop over, but they had all had plans this year. I did my best to relax and enjoy the night because I did typically enjoy this holiday, and I didn't want some dream to ruin it for me. I helped my mom and grandma set up their chairs on the porch, and we started lighting it up. I was actually starting to have fun when they got out the dancing bees for my mom. That's when it came back to the forefront of my mind, when I had a sense of déjà vu as I walked out the door asking my mom where something was. In my dream, I had just walked out the door to ask her for something similar and decided to wait because she was telling me that they were about to light it off. As she started telling me that they were going to light it and to go get my grandma because she had gone inside for something, I told my mom instead to come inside with me. She declined, saying she didn't want to miss it, so I tried convincing her to watch it from the kitchen window as it faced out into the backyard. She again declined. I didn't know what else to do, so I stood there next to her, mentally freaking out over a stupid dream, but something wasn't right. So as my dad yelled he was lighting it and running off, I went back in the house and, without thinking, screamed for my mom to help me with Grandma. Sure enough, she did come running to me as I stood in the kitchen. When she came in and noticed my grandma was nowhere around me, she became pretty upset with me. She yelled at me like, "What's gotten into you?" And going on from there when I heard my brother or dad yelling. We quickly ran back outside to see my brother frozen in place and my dad spraying the water hose over our little fireworks platform. Then we noticed a big chunk of something on the porch that barely missed my mother's chair. It was still smoldering, so my mom had me run to get water to put it out to make sure it didn't burn anymore. Shortly after, my grandmother came back out looking just as confused as my mom. After we put it out, my dad explained to my mom what had happened. He lit the display, and after returning to where they were standing, they noticed the wick had gone out. Then he noticed we weren't outside, so he started walking towards the door to find out where we went, since this was specifically for my mom, when out of nowhere, it exploded. They saw a few pieces go flying, but for the most part, it had caught fire right where it was, so my dad rushed to grab the hose and put it out. After it cooled, my dad broke apart the piece that landed on the porch, and it seemed to be like a mortar shell of some sort that was warped, so it didn't seem like it could break open. This happened many years ago, so I don't quite remember how he explained it. But the scary part was, it would have definitely done damage if it hit my mom, if it didn't kill her. I just remember shaking and crying when it all happened and hugging my dad since he was okay. My mom then asked me what the hell was going on with me being so worried about this particular firework, and I finally explained the dream I had. To my surprise, my mom and grandma looked shocked, whereas my dad thought it was strange and my brother didn't say much. We cleaned up the debris from that nightmare and continued with our night, with my brother teasing me every once in a while with a, "Is this one safe to light?" But I was still on edge, feeling relieved that we may have avoided something much worse, and also scared that I may have predicted this. Not long after the 4th celebration, we started hearing and seeing in the news about fireworks accidents such as fires, injuries, and death, and would you believe me if I said the makers of that stupid dancing bees was listed? We weren't the only ones that had something happen where it ended a lot worse for them, and it creeps me out thinking, what if they had some kind of warning like I did? Would things have been different for them too? I've never had a dream before or after that felt as real as that one, but it's just so strange that it happened. My grandma said I probably have some kind of ability that I wasn't aware of before and wholeheartedly believes in me. This is why I adore her. To be honest though, I don't think I want to experience that again. Seeing someone close to you die, whether in real life or a dream, can definitely be traumatizing. Oh, and always remember firework safety. This happened in the early 2000s. At the time, I lived in Florida and was about 13 years old. It was a different time for sure, where a bunch of us kids would be outside messing around, digging in the mud, climbing trees, doing things little boys did all day and late into the night. And on top of that, it was usually without adult supervision. The neighborhood, as I remembered it, was pretty cool too. No one that was dangerous, just your average people like my family. I say this because it was normal for us older kids to go off and do our own thing, as long as we came home by whatever curfew we were given. But after this event, I didn't even like to go out at night anymore, and never without an adult. It was the 4th of July, and my family was having their normal party with other relatives. It was my parents, me, my 3 siblings, my grandparents, aunt and uncle, and their 2 kids. One of my cousins, Joey, was close to my age, and we were pretty much best friends. They actually lived a few blocks over, so I would ride my bike over there to play with them. So when they showed up, we immediately started showing off the fireworks we had, sharing and trading the goods, and went around the yard for things to blow up and color with firecrackers and smoke bombs. If you've never taken your sister's old Barbie doll to stain with smoke bombs and blow up, then you were missing out. So the day was going well, doing the stuff we were allowed to do. Then it started getting dark, so the adults were setting up their spots on the sidewalk where they would be watching the show. Of course, I was the oldest though, so we were always waiting to shoot off our stuff. After some time, one of my siblings started to be a nuisance, doing things little siblings did, following me around, asking to light off my stuff, copying me, the normal things. When I told my parents, we all pretty much got in trouble and were told to stop arguing, or we would just have to go inside for the night. I was pretty annoyed, so I just sat on the porch stewing as Joey tried to cheer me up. We came up with a plan to get us away from the fam for a while and asked if Joey and I could walk down to the fireworks stand that wasn't far from us. After thinking it over, they finally agreed to let us go, giving me like $20 to pick up a few things they specifically wanted, and we headed off, celebrating our small victory and having time for ourselves. Of course, we were still young boys up to no good, and Joey still had his dad's lighter, so I brought some fireworks for us to shoot off as we walked. We tossed a few in the road after a car passed, or threw some in the ditch next to the road as it had some water in it. If you've ever thrown fireworks in water, you know the fun in watching it splash back up. So, the further we went along the sidewalk, the fewer street lights there were, as there was a lot of agricultural land on the sides. The fireworks stand was an old farm supply shop that is usually empty until this time of the year. So, after we went over a small hill, we could see the building in the distance. As we were walking, though, we saw what looked like a person on the other side of the road up ahead. But the shape of them made us stare a little longer than we should have. They looked like they were wearing a thick jacket or a blanket wrapped around them. Again, it was July in Florida. That was not something you normally saw someone wearing, so it was definitely an odd sight for us to see, but we pretty much just left it at that. We continued on, occasionally looking up at them to see if they were still just standing there, when they started walking down the street in our direction, but on the other side of the road still. At this point, we had stopped talking, and we had reached the part where we were both walking across from each other, so we slowed to a stop and looked at him. He was standing there almost directly under the streetlight, but from what I could tell from the outlines and colors, they weren't wearing a jacket. It was some kind of fursuit. But it wouldn't be as weird if it was a set though. No, this was creepier because you could tell it was piecemeal together. The bottom part looked yellow or tan in color and seemed to look really dirty. The top part looked purple or blue, and the fur looked longer or thicker, but also looked extremely matted, like a really old stuffed animal that was left out in the elements for days. Then there was the mask. It had a long snout like that of a dog, maybe, but the fur or hair was really long going down the back of the mask, and again looked like a mess. It looked like someone found different pieces of a costume in different dumpsters and decided to make it into one. If there's one thing it succeeded at, it was looking unsettling. They turned their head and just stared at us, which is when we got a better look at the mask, but we didn't know how to react other than to stare back. Then they made some kind of aggressive motion towards us. Sorry, I don't know how to explain the motion he made, but it was kind of like he was telling us to back up, but he was also growling as he did. This definitely made us jump a bit, and we decided we should probably just keep going and try not to look at them anymore. We picked up our pace and again started talking about the situation, but not long after, we heard the quick shuffling of what sounded like someone running, so we turned around only to find this terrifying furry man running towards us. Yes, that would have been terrifying alone, but they were running towards us on all four. It was like they were galloping and the motion looked natural, other than their legs clearly being longer than their arms. So we did what any terrified child would do and took off running towards the fireworks building, screaming. We started hearing the growling sounds again as they were starting to catch up to us, but we made it to the building and quickly ran inside as we saw several people turn and look at us in shock. An older lady then swiftly approached us and told us we would have to leave because this wasn't a place to mess around. We tried to explain to her what happened, frightened that she was going to force us back out there with that thing around, but she looked out the door and told us that we could make our purchase then, but would have to leave afterwards, so we agreed. We tried to compose ourselves the best we could and walk around to gather what we wanted and what we were asked to get. It certainly didn't stop the lady from watching us the whole time we were in there, though. I'm sure we may have looked a little suspicious as we just looked over a lot of the items just to buy us some time as we weren't ready to go back out there. After going over each aisle, we finally brought our items to the front and paid for them, trying to be as polite as possible. I asked the person that rang us up if they had a phone that we could use to call home, hoping someone might be able to pick us up instead. Hesitantly, they brought up a cordless phone, and I tried calling, but to no surprise, no one answered. So we decided it was time for us to buck up and head home. The only benefit this time was that we had more fireworks, including Roman candles, that we were hoping to be able to fire at them if they came back for us. We started our speed walk back to my place, trying to act cool and fine, but I know I was still scared, and I know Joey was too by the look on his face, and the fact that we both kept looking around. Thankfully, my dad must have thought something was up, and as we rounded the corner, I recognized his truck and we immediately ran over to it. We jumped in the back, telling him we already got everything and to go home. When we got back, we explained to them what happened, but of course, they didn't believe us. My mom and aunt kept claiming we probably just didn't see them clearly, and my dad and uncle teased they probably were just doing it to scare people. Whatever the case, I never liked going out at night, and especially not without an adult that could fight off some man-bear-dog thing. And the fact that instead of running at us like a human, they dropped to their hands and feet and ran at us like that is the image I cannot forget. Joey and I still bring it up on occasion when we're together, and he remembers it just as I do. It still freaks me out to think what could have happened if they did catch up to us. What were their plans? Whatever they were, I'm glad we ruined their plans, and I hope they weren't able to follow through with any other targets. So that, my friends, was a collection of 4th of July stories. For those in the US, of course, Independence Day. Anybody else doesn't have a 4th of July, but they have something equivalent, like Canada Day. So we'll just pretend it's that. People getting together and probably doing stupid stuff. Fireworks, yay. I'm not a fireworks person. Liked them as a kid, that was always fun, but not really my thing anymore. I like to hold the Roman candles when they would go off. And Raven always thought I was crazy for doing that, but I know that's kind of dangerous now, so I don't do it anymore. But I guess that was my crazy / scary thing that I would do for 4th of July. I'm pretty boring. Anyways, if you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like below. And if you'd like to hear more content like this, consider subscribing. And lastly, don't forget to leave a comment on your thoughts, or let me know, do you do anything for the holiday or something similar? Or any type of holiday that happens near you for the summer. Maybe your birthday's in the summer. Happy birthday to you. If so, yeah, just leave a comment. And with that being said, friends, I hope you have a fantastic week. Be safe this week if you do celebrate. And until next time, take care.